Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would talk about this upcoming fight between Jermell Charlo and Brian Castano because I think it is such a fantastic fight and I think that it deserves to be talked about. And I think both fighters deserve props for taking this fight a unification fight to where this fight, whoever wins, is going to have, I believe, all the belts in this division. Two very talented fighters, a fight that I think is a fantastic fight. Showtime has recently come out with a schedule last week where they released about 9 fights, I believe, on their schedule. And I saw some great fights on there. There was a couple of fights that I didn't think were A-grade fights. This is an A-grade fight, man. I got to give a lot of props to Jermell Charlo. I got to give a lot of props to Brian Castano. I thought that I would come out here today and give props to Jermell Charlo because I know that I've been on his brother's ass for a certain amount of time now about him, in my opinion, maneuvering and avoiding certain fights when it comes down to the overall. But when it comes down to it, I thought that I would go in this video and I would give Jermell Charlo props. And also, let me tell my viewers this when it comes down to it. One thing I like to do on this channel is that I like to review certain videos, and sometimes I like to talk about the LDBC in new media because, in my opinion, they have a very pro-racial agenda. Now, a certain amount of people have pointed out to me that well, they're not really pro-racial, they're pro-PBC. Well, I reviewed a certain amount of videos, certainly by New Media, who pretty much are part of the LDBC. They do also have very much pro-racial tendencies. And if you've seen a certain amount of the LDBC's videos, they do tend to have pro-racial tendencies, especially, channels like Drew Titan, 78 Sports TV, and there's a couple of other ones that I'm not forgetting that I haven't watched in a really long time. But when it comes down to the overall, they do have pro-racial tendencies. But also, let me tell you this, because one viewer did bring this to my attention, and I thought that it was a good idea to mention this. If you find any channels, no matter what demographic they be, no matter what ethnicity they be, if you find them to be a pro-racial channel, if you find them to be a racist channel, or overall a channel that is not logical and objective, and you would like me to review it, I certainly have no problem with reviewing it, and I would love to review the videos. If you guys want to send some links or send me a title of the video, I certainly would love to review those videos because I always love to put a logical and objective spin on things. That's what we are here, excuse me, to promote is logic and objectivity. So overall, that's the point of this channel, to put a logical and objective spin on things. So once again, if you find any overly delusional channels, especially pro-racial or racist channels, you certainly can point them out to me, and you certainly can send me a link or something like that, because I am here to give everyone a fair shake. That is one thing that you certainly can rely on me for. But anyways, that's really about it for that. Let's get into this fight. And I just wanted to ask you guys, how great of a fight do you think this is? Because when I take a look at Brian Castano in his last performance against a Brazilian fighter by the name of Patrick Teixeira, I thought that he looked absolutely fantastic. Jermell Charlo in his last fight against Rosario, now I haven't watched the full fight, so don't judge me too harshly, but when it comes down to it, from what I've seen, he looked pretty good in that fight. I know that he ended up knocking out Rosario. And when I took a look at Rosario, I know Rosario ended up getting the title because J-Rock Williams ended up losing to him. I think he ended up getting knocked out within about 4 rounds. You know, it's unfortunate because I think J-Rock actually, when you take a look at him in certain areas, is more talented than a certain amount of these fighters that he might lose to in the division. But J-Rock at times, first of all, he doesn't have an A-grade chin, and I was able to figure that out in the Jermell Charlo fight, because even though Jermell Charlo is a very powerful puncher, there were certain punches where J-Rock, even in that fight, ended up getting hurt by certain punches that he probably really should have not got hurt by. So it is what it is. But J-Rock is kind of out of the picture for right now, and Brian Castano is obviously the next fight. But Jermell Charlo, excuse me, he has 3 out of the 4 belts right now, and I believe that Brian Castano, and what time does this fight happen? July 17th. Okay. Brian Castano, I believe, has the WBO title, and to be honest with you, man, I think that he has a decent shot. I'm going to favor Jermell Charlo in this fight. I think that Jermell Charlo is a very talented fighter, but I do think he has faults. I think that he actually has more faults than his brother Jermell. I know I get on Jermell Charlo's ass quite a bit, but I think Jermell Charlo still is a very skilled fighter. I actually think that Jermell Charlo and Jermell, they do have somewhat of similar problems in their fighting style, but I believe that Jermell Charlo is the greater athlete than Jermell, and I believe that maybe he's a slightly more talented fighter than Jermell is. But Jermell versus Brian Castano, man, I think this is a fantastic fight. this could be an absolute war. I think the way that I see this fight going, I think Jermell Charlo and Brain Castano, I think they are going to have a war. I think Jermell Charlo is going to be mainly on the back foot in this fight. Brain Castano seems to be mainly a pressure fighter. Now, the first time that I seen Brain Castano, I was not overtly impressed with him, but that was because the first time I seen him was against a fighter, one of my favorite fighters to watch actually, by the name of Erislandy Lara. Erislandy Lara, I think, was always a fighter that never really truly got the credit that he deserved in the sport of boxing. Unfortunately, a lot of those Cuban fighters tend not to. But that ended up being a split draw in that fight, I believe. I thought Lara was looking very good in parts, but unfortunately, Lara, especially at this point in time in his career, there's just certain fights that he has cost himself in because there's certain rounds that he just does not throw enough. So even though I personally probably would have given the decision to Lara in that fight against Brain Castano, he just did not throw enough in that fight to 100% definitively win. So I understand the split draw, but that was the first time I remember seeing Brain Castano, and I was like, he seems decently talented, but he doesn't seem like an A-class fighter to me. Well, when I seen him against Patrick Teixeira, he looked absolutely fantastic. I thought that his counterpunching was good. I thought that his constant attack to the body looked very good. His constant pressure really overwhelmed Patrick Teixeira. His power looks pretty decently good. And Jermell Charlo, he has decent power. We obviously know that he can knock certain people out, but I wouldn't say that he necessarily has A-grade power. A certain amount of people may disagree. But when you take a look at it, as you can see, he does only just barely have over a 50% KO percentage when it comes down to the overall. Brain Castano, I think he has like 17 wins and 12 knockouts. So when it comes down to it, man, I don't know. The bottom line is this. I'm very excited for this fight. Both of these fighters deserve a lot of props for taking this fight. It is a humongous fight in my opinion. It's a fight that could go either way. I would say that it is 60-40 most likely towards Jermell Charlo. Maybe someone would even say 70-30. But when it comes down to it, I think that Brain Castano actually has a real chance in this fight overall to possibly pull out, man. I think that he's a very talented fighter. He's putting on constant pressure on some of these guys. He has decent power. Jermell Charlo is not unhittable. He can be very hittable in certain situations. Brain Castano might actually have a style that brings a lot of trouble to Jermell Charlo, and I think that's a big part of the reason why this makes such an interesting fight. So we'll see what happens, man. I'm very excited for this fight. Let me know overall what you guys think of this fight and who you think will win this fight. I just thought that I would release this video because I think both of these fighters deserve a lot of props for taking this fight. It is a humongous fight. I think it is a very fantastic fight. Let me know who you think is going to win this fight and why. And that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.